The science behind cats running away from you is absolutely fascinating. And once you understand what's actually happening in their brains and bodies, you'll never look at cat behavior the same way again. Whether we're talking about that stray cat in your neighborhood who bolts the second you try to approach, or even your own pet cat who sometimes acts like you're a stranger, there's some seriously cool biology and psychology at work here. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why cats do this, what they're thinking and feeling in those moments, and what it all means from a scientific perspective. Let's dive in. Cats are hardwired as both predator and prey animals, which creates a constant state of alertness. This is the foundation for understanding why cats run, and it's something that makes them completely different from dogs. Dogs were bred from wolves who are pack animals and apex predators. They're not really worried about being eaten by something bigger. But cats in the wild are small enough that they have to worry about hawks, coyotes, larger cats, and other predators, while simultaneously being hunters themselves. This dual role has shaped every single aspect of how cats perceive the world and respond to potential threats. Their brains are constantly running a background calculation. Am I the hunter in this situation, or am I the prey? And when you approach a cat, especially a stray, their brain is immediately assessing you through this lens. You're significantly bigger than them, you're moving toward them rather than away, and you're making eye contact. All of these things trigger their prey instincts rather than their predator instincts. Here's what's really interesting from a neurological perspective. Cats have what's called a highly sensitive threat detection system in their amygdala, which is the part of the brain that processes fear and emotional responses. This system is calibrated to be extra sensitive because in nature, a cat that doesn't respond quickly enough to potential danger is a dead cat, so their brains are basically designed to err on the side of caution, which means they'd rather run from something that turns out to be safe than risk staying near something that might be dangerous. When a cat sees you approaching, especially if you're a stranger or if you're moving in ways they perceive as predatory, their amygdala lights up and triggers what's called the fight or flight response. For most cats, flight is the preferred option because fighting something as big as a human doesn't make strategic sense. So they run, not because they necessarily think you're going to hurt them, but because their survival instincts are telling them that running is the safest bet. Cats have a concept called flight distance that's determined by their level of socialization and past experiences. This is super fascinating because it explains why some cats will let you get within a few feet before running, while others bolt when you're still 20 feet away. Flight distance is essentially an invisible bubble around the cat that, when breached, triggers their escape response. For stray cats who've had minimal positive human contact, this flight distance can be enormous, sometimes 15 to 20 feet or more. Their brains have learned through experience or lack of socialization that humans are unpredictable and potentially dangerous, so they maintain a large safety buffer. Even if you're just standing there not doing anything threatening, the simple act of being within their flight distance is enough to make them uncomfortable and ready to run. What determines flight distance is really interesting from a developmental perspective. Cats have what's called a critical socialization period, between roughly 2 and 7 weeks of age. During this window, their brains are incredibly plastic and open to learning what's safe and what's dangerous. Kittens who have positive experiences with humans during this period develop much smaller flight distances because their brains categorize humans as safe. But kittens who don't have human contact during this critical window, or who have negative experiences, develop these large flight distances that can be really difficult to change later in life. Here's something that blows my mind. Studies have shown that even friendly, well-socialized adult cats can have their flight distance temporarily increase based on context. If a cat is in an unfamiliar environment, if there are loud noises or strong smells, or if they're feeling unwell, their flight distance expands because their threat detection system becomes more sensitive. It's like their brain is saying, "I'm already dealing with uncertainty here, so I need more space to feel safe." Even pet cats can exhibit flight behavior with their own owners sometimes, and it's often related to this flight distance concept combined with context. Maybe you approached them too quickly, or from an angle they didn't see you coming from, or while they were focused on something else and you startled them, their brain didn't have time to recognize you as safe before the flight response kicked in. Cats read human body language as predatory based on specific movements and behaviors. This is where things get really interesting, because a lot of the ways humans naturally interact are the exact opposite of how cats communicate non-threatening intentions to each other. We're basically speaking a completely different language, and from the cat's perspective, we're often saying, "I'm a threat," when we think we're saying, "I'm friendly." Let's start with eye contact, because this is huge. In cat language, direct, sustained eye contact is a challenge or a threat. It's what cats do when they're about to fight, or when they're trying to intimidate each other. When you look directly at a cat and hold that gaze, their brain interprets this as aggression, which makes them want to get away from you. Predators also use direct eye contact when stalking prey, so you're triggering both their "this might attack me" response and their "this might be hunting me" response. At the same time, cats communicate friendliness and non-threatening intentions through something called slow blinking, and by looking away or looking at things near you rather than directly at you. When you approach a cat with direct eye contact, you're doing the exact opposite of what would make them feel safe. Then there's the way humans move. We tend to move directly toward things we're interested in straight lines, at a consistent pace. Guess what else moves like that? Predators stalking prey cats, when approaching each other in friendly ways, move in curves, they pause frequently, they might approach and then move away, then approach again. This indirect movement pattern signals non-threatening intentions. When you walk straight toward a cat, especially at a steady pace without pausing, their brain reads this as predatory pursuit behavior. It doesn't matter that you're smiling or talking in a sweet voice. Their visual system is processing your movement pattern and flagging it as dangerous. This is why you'll sometimes notice that if you walk past a cat without looking at them or moving toward them, they're much more likely to stay put or even approach you. You've accidentally used the correct body language by not engaging in predatory movement patterns. Here's another fascinating element. The speed at which you move matters enormously. Quick movements trigger the cat's prey drive response, because that's how prey animals move when they're trying to escape. Slow, deliberate movements are much less threatening because they're more predictable and give the cat time to assess whether you're actually a threat. But here's the catch. If you move too slowly while also staring and moving directly toward them, you look even more like a stalking predator. It's this delicate balance of movement, eye contact, and approach angle that determines whether a cat sees you as safe or threatening. Stray cats specifically have developed heightened stress responses due to living in unpredictable environments. Let's talk specifically about stray and feral cats for a moment, because their brain chemistry is actually different from indoor pet cats in some really important ways. Living on the streets or in the wild is incredibly stressful for cats, and chronic stress literally changes their brain structure and hormone levels. Stray cats have elevated baseline cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. This means they're living in a constant state of low-level stress that makes them hyper-vigilant and quicker to react to potential threats. Their nervous systems are basically always in a slightly elevated alert state, so it takes much less stimulus to trigger a full fear response compared to a pet cat living in a safe, predictable home. What's really sad about this is that chronic stress actually makes the amygdala larger and more reactive, while making the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational decision-making, less effective. This means stray cats are literally less able to override their fear responses with logical assessment of whether something is actually dangerous. Their brains are stuck in survival mode where it's better to run from everything, just in case rather than risk staying to evaluate whether you're friendly. There's also something called learned fear that's really powerful in stray cats. If a stray cat has ever had a negative experience with a human, being kicked, having things thrown at them, being chased, or even just being handled roughly when they were trying to be caught, their brain creates a strong association between humans and danger. Every time they see a human after that, their brain automatically retrieves that fear memory and triggers the flight response before they even consciously process what's happening. What makes this particularly challenging is that fear memories are stored differently than other memories. They're stored in a part of the brain that's designed to react fast without thinking, which is great for survival, but makes it really hard to override those responses later. A stray cat who learned that humans are dangerous might run from humans forever, even if they later have opportunities for positive experiences, because that original fear memory is so deeply embedded, your own pet cat might run from you due to overstimulation or predictive behavior patterns. Now, let's talk about why even your own beloved pet cat might sometimes run away from you, because this confuses a lot of cat owners. The most common reason is something called sensory overstimulation, and it's fascinating how this works in a cat's nervous system. Cats have incredibly sensitive nervous systems. Their skin is packed with sensory receptors, especially along their backs, tails, and bellies. When you pet a cat, you're activating thousands of these receptors simultaneously, sending huge amounts of sensory information to their brain. At first, this feels good. It's why cats purr and lean into pets. But there's a threshold where the amount of sensory input becomes too much, and the pleasure switches to discomfort or even pain. Here's what's happening neurologically. The sensory neurons that process touch can only handle so much stimulation before they start sending too much signals to the brain. When this happens, the cat's brain interprets this overload as an aversive stimulus, similar to how constant loud noise becomes painful to humans, even though moderate noise is fine. The cat's immediate response is to escape the source of overstimulation, which means running away from you. The tricky part is that this threshold varies from cat to cat and even day to day in the same cat based on their mood, energy level, and what else is going on in their environment. Some cats can be petted for hours and never reach this threshold. Other cats can only handle 30 seconds of petting before they're overstimulated, and cats don't usually give a lot of warning before they hit that threshold. They might go from purring and seeming happy to suddenly running away or even swatting at you. There's also something really interesting about cats learning patterns and predicting your behavior. Cats are incredibly good at pattern recognition. It's part of what makes them such effective hunters. They learn to associate certain cues with certain outcomes, and they use this information to predict what's about to happen. If you have patterns where you approach your cat and then do something they don't enjoy, like picking them up when they don't want to be held, or giving them medicine or putting them in the carrier for a vet visit, your cat will learn to recognize the early signs of these sequences and run before you get close enough to execute the unwanted behavior. They're not running because they're scared of you generally. They're running because they've predicted based on context clues that you're about to do something they want to avoid. I know someone whose cat would bolt the second she walked toward him while carrying a towel because he'd learned that towel plus approaching equals bath time, which he hated. The cat was fine with her approaching at all other times, but that specific combination of cues triggered his flight response because he'd learned what it meant. The good news is that cat flight responses can be modified through understanding and patience. Here's where things get really hopeful. While cats have all these hardwired instincts and learned responses that make them run, they're also incredibly capable of learning new associations and updating their threat assessments based on positive experiences. For stray cats, the key is something called desensitization, combined with positive associations. This means gradually exposing the cat to human presence at a distance that doesn't trigger their flight response, and pairing that exposure with something positive like food. Over time, the cat's brain starts to update its assessment of humans from always dangerous to sometimes associated with good things. The science behind why this works is fascinating. When a cat experiences something positive, their brain releases dopamine and other feel-good chemicals that counteract the fear response. If you can consistently provide positive experiences without triggering the flight response, you're literally rewiring their brain to have a different emotional reaction to humans. For your own pet cat, the solution is about learning to read their body language and respecting their boundaries before they feel the need to run watch for early signs of overstimulation. Tail twitching, skin rippling, ears starting to go back, and stop petting before they reach their threshold. Approach them in ways that aren't predatory. Look away slightly. Move slowly. Let them come to you. When you do this consistently, your cat learns that interactions with you are safe and under their control, which dramatically reduces flight responses. There's something really beautiful about understanding all of this science. It helps us realize that when cats run from us, it's not personal, and it's not them being mean or antisocial. It's their incredibly sophisticated survival system doing exactly what it was designed to do, keeping them safe in a world where they're both hunter and hunted. When we understand the science behind their behavior, we can work with their instincts rather than against them, building trust and connection in ways that make sense to their feline brains. Drop a comment and tell me about your experiences with cats running from you, whether it's a stray you've been trying to befriend or your own cat who sometimes acts like you're a stranger. Understanding the science makes it so much easier to be patient with them. So there you have it. The fascinating neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and behavioral psychology behind why cats run away. From their dual role as predator and prey, to their sensitive nervous systems, to the way they read our body language as threatening, it all comes together to explain this behavior that can seem so frustrating but is actually an amazing example of finely tuned survival instincts. The more you understand about how your cat's brain works, the better you can communicate with them in ways they actually understand, and the stronger your bond will become. If you enjoyed learning about the science behind cat behavior, you'll definitely enjoy this one as well, so go watch it right now.